let people fail, right? I think, and when I look back over my career, and this is what I tell college kids, I tell everybody this. The number one thing I look forward to when I wake up every day is I look for the opportunity to fail.
Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have another special guest on, Mr. Chris Ortega. And what I really like about him is that not only is he a finance leader, is he's also an entrepreneur. And you know, if you watch this show, I love marrying the mindset because I think there's so many things that entrepreneurs learn and do that are very useful even in the professional realm. So welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Terrell. Glad to be a part of the show, man.
Awesome. Now, a couple of things I want to talk about today. I mean, definitely as a finance influencer, I want to hit on that a little bit. Also the entrepreneurial side. But one of the things that I think that is a very, very important topic I want to talk about is, you know, the culture in a company, and you're in the tech space. So I definitely want to hit on that. So before we jump to that, tell us a little bit about, you know, your background and kind of what was your life before becoming, you know, Chris Ortega, the finance influencer.
Yeah, so I think for me, I'm born and raised in Indianapolis, Indiana. That's where I started my roots, and I've Indiana through and through. So did all my undergraduate work there. Professionally, I've kind of had a wide spectrum of professional opportunities. I started my career in public accounting at Big Four at Ernst & Young. Tremendous opportunity to work with a lot of the Fortune 100 and 500 companies that we have here in Indianapolis. I was in audit. So that was a tremendous experience of being able to see processes, learn multiple different industries. And then I would say for probably after that, I've been on this trajectory of working at high growth, entrepreneurial startup technology companies. So that is really my day job. And then outside of the entrepreneurial side, I do a lot of consulting work. I do a lot of thought leadership. I do a lot of public speaking. I do a lot of things that help people evolve this FP&A, like finance and accounting, from FP&A 1.0 to 2.0, which is basically moving from scorekeeping to valued integrators and valued advisors inside the business. So I think for me, that's been my trajectory. One unique thing about me that I've learned in business is I used to be an amateur boxer for about 5
Oh,
years.
wow.
So I used to box, and there's one thing I learned in business that I'll take this the rest of my life. There's nothing I'm ever going to encounter harder in business than taking a body shot in the Golden Gloves and not pooping yourself in front of everybody.
Wow.
So I think for me, like, that's something I'm really passionate about is fitness, working out. And I picked up boxing, and I do coaching on the side as well to work with my local boxing team to give back to my community, which is supporting a lot of minorities that are getting into boxing as well. So that's just a little bit about me professionally in my career, man. And, you know, like I said, I'm excited to share any other thoughts that are needed. So.
Gotcha. One of the things that I like to talk about quickly is when you talk about, you know, in the finance space, is going from being a scorekeeper to really adding value. I mean, and that's something that, like I said, as a accounting corporate finance, I mean, my background is very similar. I mean, went from, you know, Big Four accounting to working in Fortune 500 to my last role was, you know, with a high growth tech company. So very similar background, but what are your thoughts about, you know, how do you help people in the finance space shift that mindset from we're no longer just scorekeepers in the background. We got to actually help add value and move the business forward.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, I talk about, all across, I do podcasts, webinars, and I talk with so many different senior leaders in multiple different spaces here on that various topic. And I think when you think about it, think about the efficiency and business insight that accounting and finance drives, right? If you have high efficiency and high business insight, like if you're at this top right quadrant is what I called it, that is a valued integrator, right? That is the holy grail of what you want to be. You want to be high on your efficiency. You want to be leveraging technology. You want to be using AI and machine learning. You want to be leveraging as much as technology that gets you efficient and focus your people on providing this high business insight, right? That's where you want to be. And technology helps you get there. People help you get there. Solid processes help you get to that stage, right? But really, when you see a lot, and I mean, I've talked to big, you know, billion-dollar organizations and worked and done consulting work with these teams, man. And so many of them sit down in this lower quadrant, right? They're low in efficiency, they're low on business insight. And what do I mean by that is just a simple question, right? You know if you're a valued integrator by answering this simple question. I challenge so many different leaders to ask this question. Go to your senior leadership team and ask them, what is the value that accounting, finance, FP&A brings to our organization?
Wow.
Ask them that question, right? And if they say to you, oh man, accounting, finance, usually you are the guys that get me the numbers when I need the numbers. Okay, like that's great, but how is that really pushing the business forward to draw the insights, right? And what you really want them to say to get to value integration, this top right, is to say, there's not a business conversation that I don't make or don't consult my business accounting and finance FP&A partners to go make. They are my right-hand people to before I make any data-driven decision inside the organization. I go make sure I partner with the accounting finance group. That is holy grail, right? And so many times it's that leap. And I think it doesn't, a lot of times people ask me like, Chris, where do you even start to make that journey, right? To me, you don't have to get the Power BI, the Tableaus and go down this technology route. You have to really assess your people, right? Take a step back as a leader and say, what are the skill sets that I have right now amongst my team, right? Do I have people that are really into data and data analysis and data mining? Do I have people that really love the partnership element of coordinating with people? Do I have strategic planners on my team? Do a inventory of your people skill sets now, because you may have that accountant that's like, I mean, I was like this like 6, 7, 8 years ago where I did my public accounting, did all this, and I was like, man, the future of everything there's going to be is in this finance. It's answering the question of what are we going to do about it, right? And I think like accounting has traditionally, there's 3 business questions that we answer as a group. What do we do? And what are we going to do about what do we say we're going to do? What do we do? And what are we going to do about it, right? What do we say? And then what do we do? That's primarily the historical piece, right? That's saying we had a budget of 12 widgets and we did 10 widgets, right? That's where pretty much scorekeeping stops. The most value add is saying, taking all this information and say, what are we going to do about it? That is the value, right? That is where you dive into the numbers. How does this change our forecast? What was the drivers? Is it a one-time thing? Like, do we predict this going forward? Does it change this going forward? Like, that is the kind of conversation. So I think for me, like that piece of stepping from scorekeeper and valued integration, man, is something that every organization, you need to be focused on. And I talk to a lot of CFOs and they think, well, Chris, we're a 4-person team.
Oh, wow.
The largest accounting FP&A team I ever worked in was 8 people, right? That was our FP&A team. And this was for a billion-dollar pharmaceutical drug development company. You don't need large teams. You don't need significant dollars to get down this road. You need to have a plan. You need to focus on the people first, get those processes down, and then look towards the technology. A lot of times what I see, Terrell, is people go the other way around. They're like, oh, I'm going to get Power BI. I'm going to get this fancy technology that's going to solve all your problems from moving scorekeeping to value integration. And to me, that's a critical flaw to make. So, for me, that's at a high level, that's some things that I really advocate and talk about and really push our industry to get to FP&A 2.0.
And I think that that's a very, very great perspective, because that's one of those things that I learned probably like with the first Fortune 500 company I was working with, where very young in my career, and just, like I said, I came from Big Four accounting. I was, doing the numbers, I provided the numbers, and then I was fortunate to be in like a finance leadership program. And I was in a meeting with the VP of engineering, and I provided the numbers, said, hey, here's a business case on the idea. And he's looking at it and he's like, okay, what action should I be taking off of this? Like, what does this actually mean? And there is where the light bulb went off for me. It's like, my job is more than just providing the numbers. Like, I have to help them navigate the decisions that they need to make. And like, from that point on, I started switching it. And to, like you said, is where every job, my goal was, if I was working with a non-finance person, I wanted them to say, hey, you know what, before we make this decision, let me go talk to Terrell.
Boom.
Or, hey, what does Terrell have to say about this? Because, I mean, when you think about it, I mean, if you're in a for-profit business, I mean, and profitability is what you're trying to maximize with the different decisions that you're making, I mean, you want to understand what's the financial impact of it. And as you start to move to that front line, I think it changes the landscape, and it actually made finance and accounting more enjoyable when you're doing that.
Totally, man. Totally, dude. Totally. Yeah. I mean, you hit the note right on the head, man. It's that light bulb moment. I think right now, the pandemic and other situations have caused people to really accelerate those initiatives, right? Yeah, and I think that's something where it continues to have the value add, right? Because I always look at FP&A as being like guiding the ship, right? Like you got the chief marketing officer, you got the COO, you got all these people in the boat, but it's the chief, it's the FP&A person, it's the finance person that's guiding to say, hey, we're going down the stream, we need to turn left because we're going to hit this, we need to keep going, we need to accelerate here. That's how I've always looked at it, man. And you'd be surprised I've seen small to large organizations that have a hard time adopting that methodology.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of that adoption comes through is because now you're asking for accounting, finance, FP&A people to have a completely different skill set, right? You're not asking them to know how to record a depreciation entry, right? You're asking them to say, hey, go partner with the sales group, understand the opportunities, risk, and challenges that they face that can help them maximize the KPIs that they're tracking in their business. That's what you're asking people to do,
Yeah.
right? And that's like a whole nother skill set, a whole nother ball game for, again, getting down to that core piece around talent development and people.
Mhm. Awesome. Now, speaking of, like I said, the consulting and the thought leadership, where can people find you online or follow you on social media to see where all that is?
Yeah, so my LinkedIn is Chris Ortega, comma MBA. You can just look at it on there. I'm on Twitter as well, _future CEO. And then also most of all my publications and everything that I have around that is going to be on my LinkedIn profile. So you can find everything that I produce from a podcast, webinar, content series, all that through my LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with me. And like I said, for me, like that's an important avenue for accessing stuff. And I do a lot of thought leadership and communication with a large accounting finance organizations here in the U.S. as well as abroad. I do stuff with the AFP, AICPA, you name it. I've probably done some work with them. So that's where you can find all that content in my social media stuff.
Awesome, awesome. Now, the other topic that I really wanted to talk on that I think is extremely relevant to what's going on right now. I mean, whether it's, navigating COVID, or whether it's, with everything that's going on in the culture. I mean, there's so many different aspects of it, is building that culture within, let's just say, within the tech company,
Yeah.
within a high growth tech company. Because a lot of people, when they hear about, culture, they talk about, hey, we have, this type of happy hour, we have this type of event. But what I've found is that it's more than just having an occasional event where people get together and have fun. I mean, so what have you seen as far as, how important it is to be intentional about the culture that is in your organization, and kind of what does that mean to you?
Yeah, Terrell, that is a awesome, excellent question. Definitely with a lot of things going on right now. And I think it's three facets that I look at establishing that culture. You're exactly right. You have to have a culture that goes beyond, hey, we provide free drinks in our break room for everybody. Like that's a good thing to have, but that shouldn't be something you highlight as a culture, right? The first element of it is getting a culture that's about empowerment and not directive driven, right? So what do I mean by that? Being working in an international, multinational company, dude, I see that everywhere. I see where some of our operations is very directive driven. And what do I mean by directive driven? It's a person say, hey, go march off of that bridge right now. And they're like, oh, well, he told me to go march off the bridge, so I guess everything's okay. I should just go do that. Versus empowerment to say, you know what? Maybe I should go march off that bridge. Maybe I should go focus on doing this right now and have that experience, right? I think that is so key right now. And a lot of organizations and teams across the board are really being forced to have that less directive empowerment culture because a lot of work is remote now. Like most of the work is remote. You don't have that person in the office that is sitting there every day directing people to do stuff. You have to empower people. You have to give them trust, and you have to give them the leeway and ability to make mistakes. Let people fail, right? I think, and when I look back over my career, and this is what I tell college kids, I tell everybody this. The number one thing I look forward to when I wake up every day is I look for the opportunity to fail. That sounds counterintuitive. You're like, Chris, why are you looking for failure? The reason why I look for failure is because when I look back at my career, personally, school, everything, the biggest value that I've had as a person is always through failure. Every time I failed, I've learned the most. So thriving in an environment that puts you in those situations to support you to learn and a learning culture, I think is number one, and that empowerment directive. Number two is culture doesn't just extend with your leadership group. I think a lot of times organizations get buckled down because they're like, well, we got to have our leader. We got to have everybody doing this stuff. Culture is about every single person. You don't have to be a leader. You can be an individual contributor all the way to the CFO. You all have an active role in driving that culture. But one of the most important things is your senior leaders have to be bought in on your culture. They have to be bought in on the values. They have to walk the walk and talk the talk, and they be drinking the same soup. For instance, if you have, if your mid managers and employees are really advocating to have, a summer series that's remotely, and your executive team is just like, oh yeah, that sounds fun, but none of your executives show up to support that stuff. Or if you really want to take a stance on combating social injustice or advocating for people that are on the front lines of COVID, right? But your leaders aren't supporting that. You gotta have your leaders supporting and really engaged, right? And that gets down to like in anything that's going to have. I think organizations do a great job of introducing things. They do a great job of implementing things, but they miss out on this third critical I: integration. You have to integrate these things inside of your culture. If you have a culture that's all about loving your customers, you should be, as a leader, all the way down to an individual contributor, showing that. If you never settle on certain things, you should always be that person advocating that. And I think it's all levels of the organizations that need to be walking and talking those three I's in terms of introducing, implementing, and integration in their culture. And I think the third piece is it's okay as a leader, and now it's more important, more so than anything. Don't fake it till you make it like you have all the answers.
Wow.
Man, I remember going through this pandemic and I was just like, you know what? Now is the time to be extremely open and transparent within reason, right? Like, obviously there's certain things that you need to make sure you keep with your leadership team. But one thing that I've done as a leader is I have been open and transparent about everything. I've sat on global leadership calls with our CEO, CFO, our entire leadership team. And I says, guys, you know what? That's a great question. I'm not even gonna fake it here like I know the answer. But one thing I'm gonna go back do is look at the data, look at the research, and I'll turn this around quickly. I think too many times in cultures, people feel like they have to, have this fake it till you make it, and like we are all about this. And you see it on LinkedIn all the time. Like, it's all good, but you see the big companies promoting their culture and like, this is what we got. We got this and we got that, which is all good things to do, right? I'm not discounting that. But more so than that, it's like I'd rather see what the frontline people are saying, right? What is their experiences of the culture? Because everybody's experience is going to be different, and you're not going to have a uniform perspective of how everybody receives their culture, right? You got to be adaptive, and you got to be okay that, hey man, like, maybe the culture we have is good for one person, but other people, you have to be agile in terms of how you adapt towards. And I think that, man, that key phrase, agility, that is so important nowadays, man, because decisions are being made, industries are being affected, bankruptcies here, unemployment's here, this is being extended, more money's coming. You're faced with all these different inputs that you have to be able to retool things on the fly. So I think for me, like, that's one thing that I've been diligent about and really, really have top of my mind is continue to build a culture, even in a remote situation. That's simple things, man. Like, whether it's virtual happy hours. Sometimes I do things with my team where I just, I buy them DoorDash lunch. We get on a call. We just sit and eat lunch. We just sit there. we're talking, eat lunch, talking about things going on, or, sometimes I do challenges to our entire office group. And I'm like, one day this week, I was like, hey, we were talking about something, and, I said, okay, gift card to anybody that can guess my middle name. And it was just on fire, right? And we were having memes. It was a lot of fun. It was the end of the day. It was a fun little thing, and everybody that contributed, or, it was a good time. So I think finding those ways to continue to build the culture in a remote situation, and like those three things I just mentioned, super valuable, bro.
And I think that's a really good point where you mentioned about just taking that time to really connect with people, because even from my experience, one of the things that I've seen, like I said, from working with, companies like GE to then working with other, small organizations, where it's very easy to get into that mode where you just want to take one approach and just spread that over everything, and not really taking the time to say, you know what, every person that's involved in this organization has their own unique, circumstance, their own unique background, their own unique situation, but really taking that time to say, you know what, I'm going to actually invest the time to really build that connection with this person, so that I understand them, and then I understand how to help them understand, what the culture is, or hey, how they can get value out of the culture. Because I do think that that is a very tempting thing. And a lot of growth companies they're growing so much. There's so many tasks. Like, I got to do my job. I got to, set targets. I got to meet target. We got to meet with leadership. And it's very tempting to just say, I'm going to do this one thing and spread it over everybody, and not take the time to really say, you know what does this person need? Or, hey, what do, this small group of people, how can I really get to know them and understand them, and then tailor this so that they can actually grasp and fully understand what this means.
Exactly. Yeah, man, you're right. In anything in business, one thing I've learned is there's no one size fit all, right? Like, you're not going to roll out any strategy, any tactic that's going to have 100% adoption from anybody, right? And that should never be a goal or target to get 100% adoption or 100% buy-in. It's really, like you said, being an active listener and really having that touch point with your people and making sure you keep that connection. So yeah, man, you're exactly right, bro.
And I think, because I'd love to hear, your thoughts on that a little bit more. I mean, from, your finance leadership position of, I mean, you're not just interacting with, people who are in, Indiana. I mean, you're
Right.
interacting with people from different countries, people who have, different professional disciplines. Like, how do you really, like I said, connect beyond, like I said, those geographical barriers and the social economic differences that people have across the different geographies that you're working in?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. And I've had the ability to work with a lot of multinational organizations to get that exact experience. And before I answer that question, I'll tell you how I failed. Let me tell you how I failed in that. I came to a Marcis about 4 years ago. Be 4 years in October. Feels like 8 because that's high growth technology. It's, I'm coming up on my doctorate degree up at a Marcis right now. But I've had all this experience in SaaS, and the fatal mistake that I made was that I know SaaS, right? Like, I've had SaaS experience. I've done it. I've led teams in SaaS. I've led an organization that eventually got bought out by competitors. So like, I came in confident in my technical skill sets, right? I'm like, I know this, I'm building this out. But one thing that I fundamentally fail, and this is where most accounting and finance people fail, right? This is God honest truth, right? When you go about building relationships, there's two key things that you have to establish: trust and competency. Too many times, accounting, finance, FP&A people focus on the competency side. The competency is the numbers, right? It's the debits, it's the credits, it's the budgets, it's it's the churn rate, it's the ARR, it's the MRR, it's all these tasks, these competency things. As finance and accounting people, we just leverage on, right? To me, that's the fundamental mistake to make. Don't focus on the competencies. Focus on building the trust. And when I got that mindset and shifted, man, my relationships start getting better. I start understanding better, because people came in and like, their feedback to me in the first 3 to 4 months were like, Chris, people are intimidated by you. And they're like, I'm I know I have an extroverted personality, and I'm basically a salesperson in a finance job. I've always faced that. Like, I get that. They're like, no, it's not that. They're just intimidated because you are so knowledgeable on this competency side that it makes them feel like anytime they ask you anything, like it's a dumb question because you're like, why do you not even know this, right? Because I came in like boom, boom, I came in hot, right? And then I said, whoa, I'm not trying to make my colleagues across the globe feel intimidated to talk, to speak to me, to learn, because I have to learn from them. So I really had to take that down and focus on building the trust. And that has been a game changer, man. That's in the trenches. Most of the time I talk to my colleagues and it's not, I message them. The number one question I've asked like plenty much everybody personally and professionally during this time, I always ask them, how are you emotionally, mentally, and physically? I ask them that. And I just, because I'm really genuinely concerned about how are you in those levels? Because those levels are across the board on a daily basis. I know I found myself in that situation. I'm like across the board on those things. So for me, it's always about establishing the trust. And once you get that trust element done and you get through some in the trenches situations with people, you continue to forge ahead, man. And I think for me, like, I learn and I sit back and listen and seek understanding and learning from so many different other cultures. And one of the things that it's allowed me to do inside my role is I visit our Hong Kong office. I go to, before everything has happened during the pandemic, I was over at our UK operations. I visit, our Vienna headquarters on a like 3 or 4 times a year. I've been to our Asia Pac team. I've been to Mexico City to work with our Latin American people. So one thing that was important to me was like, I don't want them to see me as a name in an email. I want them to see me in person, spend that time with them to learn, to understand their market, understand their challenges, to get past that, oh, Chris is going to come here and be the budget police. Chris is going to come here and help understand what I do and how I can help them, right? And that's just, that has been something I think, at Amarsis and even before that I've carried forward, which to me, I think is moving past the competency side of FP&A, which is traditionally FP&A has always been financial planning and analysis, right? That's 1.0. 2.0 is financial partnership and advising. That's a whole nother ball game, right? That's not competency focused. That's saying, hey, do I trust you to be my partner and advisor, right? It takes a lot of trust from somebody to take their recommendations and execute on it. So I think for me, that's been something that I've been working through, not only within my teams at Amarsis that I've been working through, but also helping our global organization get more around that. And then also doing consulting work and projects on the side to help organizations see like, yeah, you've got the great data analysis and the great projects and, you're producing great budget to actual reports, but this whole other element is where the value add is going to be. So for me, that's how I've really addressed like that learning curve of working with a lot of different cultures and personalities as well.
And I think that was something that was, I would say it was a challenge for me as well. I mean, because when I thought about, from a finance accounting standpoint, you're like, hey, how do I help, increase the profitability? It's like, why should I hop on a plane and go travel here when I can just send them an email? It will save the company money, but having to make that mental shift of like, what, people need to know that they're dealing with another person, not just an email.
So right, man. So right. And I think that is the piece right now during this time, the empathy element. I tell you what, man, when I look at all the top leaders and mentors that I have in my network, it's never any of them that have like, they're the best debt collector or they're the best like bank reconciliation person, or they, do the best Excel stuff. The people that I applaud and I learn and I read about every day is people with high emotional intelligence and take an empathetic servant leadership style. I think to me, man, when you distill it down to what separates a good from a great, from a legend, it's those two things: high emotional IQ and really, really, really strong empathy for people, man.
Mhm. Now, when you talk about that, like, that emotional, that EQ and that empathy, what I find with some people is that, they're a little nervous to go that route because it opens them up to vulnerability. Like, what do you say to people, who struggle with that? Like, I don't know if I want to be that vulnerable because I need to show that I have it all together, but it's just like, you're not connecting with people. Like, what do you say to someone like that?
Yeah, I think one of the most common misconceptions about leadership is that you always have the right answer. Like, I think like people just think because you're like a leader, like, oh, I know if I go to Chris, he's going to tell me the right answer and what to do. I think that's such a common misconception, man. And for me, it's about creating an environment and creating a safe space for them to be authentically who they are, right? And to just say like, look, I tell leaders, people all the time, man, I don't have the right answer, but I'll go figure it out. And I think there's humility. There's humbleness in having to know, like, you don't have to always have all the answers, right? Like, I'm a developing leader. No leader one has all the answers, has it all figured out. So I think getting over that common misconception, because people think, oh, if they come to me and I don't have the answers, they may look at me like I'm weak. I think like that. I think that's just a fatal flaw that a lot of leaders have. And to me, I always break it down by just being open and transparent, right? Be authentic, man. Like, I think like a lot of times you have to just be who you are, right? And I think for me, like, as I continue to evolve as a leader, as a person, as a professional, that's always been front of mind to me, is like boldly and confidently and authentically being and walking in my truth. And to me, my leadership style has always been about, I'm going to maximize my people. I'm going to invest my time, energy, and effort always into my people. I'm going to be open and honest. I'm going to push them. I'm going to create a learning environment, but I'm also going to be humble enough to know, is like, I don't have this all figured out, right? I tell my team all the time, like, hey guys, I don't have this figured out. I want to get your mindset and your thought process on stuff, right? Most of the time, leaders don't do that. Leaders don't go to their teams and say, hey guys, I'm struggling with this. I want to get another insight from the team, right? And I do that all the time with my team. I say, guys, I need a second set of eyes on this. I'm struggling with this particular piece. Can you help? And that fresh perspective, and knowing that they have buy-in and feedback, and it's reciprocated and received and it's appreciated, that's game changer, man. But that's creating an environment where you have to be that open. And some environments, I mean, it's not that way, right? And that's part of their culture, right? Maybe that's not part of their culture. Maybe that's just part of how business is done. I see it a lot of times in European operations. It's
Mhm.
just it's just not, we don't talk about that here, Chris. And I'm like, well, that's important though. Like, that's important. Those are important topics to talk about. Why don't you talk about those, right? Why don't you bring those up? Case in, for instance, one of the things I really applaud our organization as a team is we usually have weekly town hall meetings, and it's where we get all together. And we had a town hall conversation a couple of weeks ago where we talked about the things going on around the social injustice that we're facing here in the US, right? And our president of our operations, I commended Sean Brady for doing this, because he teed up the conversations. Guys, like, look, uh, I'm not gonna even sit here to even try to act like I know what it's like to walk in a minority shoes. What I want to do is sit back and listen and understand people's perspective. And we had all of our employees on that call, and we had people that were sharing their perspectives, right? We had individual contributors, we had people on my team, we had leaders, we had people sharing and having the willing to have the conversation. And Sean was like, Chris, how do you think that? I said, Sean, that was the best first step you can make about creating a safe environment to have the conversations. That's key. Openness to have the conversations, vulnerability, and knowing that that vulnerability is okay to have in business.
Mhm. And I think that there's something that a lot of companies struggle with. I mean, as you look at so many of the socioeconomic issues, whether it's on an income disparity, or whether it's on race and gender. I mean, whether whatever the topic is, I think that a lot of companies struggle with that because some of them feel like, hey, I have to have this perfect statement to put out there to solve their problems in this one statement. But one of the things that I've kind of seen and I've kind of recommended to people is, before you charge forward with your answer, the same way you would do in your relationships with your customer is actually listen to what they have to say
Yeah.
before you provide your solution. Because if your solution has been created in your mind, like, you don't really know if it's actually addressing the real problem or the real concern or the real hurt that the people have. So I mean, I think what have you seen, like, have you seen anything other than that approach that you would say, hey, as a leader, here are healthy ways to approach situations like that?
Yeah, and that's a great topic to have. I did a lunch and learn probably 2 weeks ago, and I had people on the call, and one person asked me that. He says, Chris, look, I understand my white privilege, and I understand the privilege that I have, and I want to be able to spark those conversations inside of our organization. How do I go about doing that? And I said, you know what, that's a great question. And the first step to start is creating that environment of being able to, like I said, have the conversations, but listen. Right.
Mhm.
I think the number one, like one of the most devalued things for leaders nowadays is like people just don't sit and listen anymore.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, and I sit and you see it. So I see it on so many times when I'm talking to people and they're so quick to just say something versus like taking a second, understanding what was said and saying, you know what, I don't have a response to that. I'm listening to you. Right. And one other thing I've educated a lot of leaders, and this is my hope around combating all social injustices, is this is not a short-term band-aid, man. This is a marathon. Like, I applaud organizations that come out with their nice and pretty elegant PR. Here's what our message is going to be. Good. That's a great first step, right? But this is all about the marathon. This is a journey organizations, people, and teams are going to face for the foreseeable future. Because as you mentioned, it's just not around police brutality, right? You look at the COVID situation. There are more minorities affected by the COVID virus across the globe than any other minority group. That's data facts, right? There's more minorities dying from it. There's more minorities that can't get healthcare from it. They're majority of the cases, right? Black, Latinos, Asian people are the mostly affected by this, right? That's one element of it. You look at the economic pieces, right? You look at the gender. I mean, there is so many social systems that are set in place that are outside of, police brutality and law enforcement that we have to combat these things, right? And I commend the organizations that look at it from the view. And this is one thing, like you see the NFL committing $250 million. You see Amazon doing this money. My thing is this, right? You commit this money, but if business starts taking a downturn and the pandemic starts, did you earmark that money to say, oh, our business is affected, so we can't give $250 million. We only can give like $50 million now, right?
Gotcha.
That to me is like, I want to see like how these long-term commitments fall through, right?
Mhm.
And I think you have to move beyond, oh, we're going to have a diversity initiative inside of our organization. You got to go layers deeper on that, man. You got to, and when you even look at the tech space, right? I've been in tech 10 years, right? I have not seen, and there's very few minority leaders in accounting and finance, FP&A leadership in small, medium, large technology companies. It's not well represented, right? So what do I do to go do that? I go work with local schools, local organizations, right? Because to me, when I grew up, I remember the first time I seen a CPA. His name was William Barr. I was at Pike High School, and he came in. He had jeans on. He had Jordans. He had a nice collar shirt, and he said he was a CPA. And I was like, whoa, like what, like this dude was smart. I was like, what is a CPA? Like, I need to figure out what that is, right? And I think a lot of times it's getting that knowledge set to the minority groups, and I advocate a lot for that as a minority leader, right? I go sit down and say, like, look, this is what I do, right? And this is the path that I came down. So I think organizations, community outreach, long-term investments to combating all social injustice. And then the preliminary step is have the dialogues, have the conversations, have your leaders support these conversations. And you're exactly right. Before you take a stance, before you go to off the ground running, make sure, like any strategy you have in business, right? If you go do a budgeting process, you have the tactics, you have the levers, you have the KPIs. This piece should be measured exactly the same. You should have that same due diligence that you go back and preparing a 12-month forecast that you have about your 12, 18, 24-month strategy on how your organization teams are going to help combat and support, help combat social injustice and help support these initiatives. The same process. So for me, that's my hope. That's the optimistic in me, is saying I hope organizations really see the value in that and don't have this as this is what we did in 2020. And then 2021 things get back to how it was, right? Which, to me, it's like that does the entire initiative a disservice.
Absolutely. I mean, and I think that mindset of, of just getting back down to the basics of, we are dealing with people. I mean, it's like, we're not dealing with groups, we're dealing with individual people. And like I said, and really taking that time to, I guess you say, almost like the grassroots effort of, I had a guest on the show, and one of the things that they talked about was, developing relationships in business. And, it's funny because what they were saying is, when it comes down to developing quality relationships and understanding, it was like, it comes down to, exactly what you're doing on this show, Terrell. One conversation at a time, to where
100%.
it's just like, it's so tempting to just be like, well, I had a conversation with this group, but it's just like, until you really break it down to another level to say, okay, how do we have conversations so I'm understanding, like, one person at a time, and really understanding where they're coming from and building, those connections and those communication bridges on that individual level. And as you do that and that compounds over time, then you start to say, okay, all right, we have a broad understanding of, after having these individual conversations, now we have a better clarity about how we can approach the issue or how we can move things forward, because we took the time to understand first.
Exactly. Exactly. It's a key phrase, man. And one thing I always trust the leaders, and I always share, seek first to understand, then be understood. Don't do it the other way around. Don't try to come out under like, this is what it is. And I think too many times, man, like leaders, organizations just, make that fundamental mistake. And you see that one thing I've appreciated about this is you've seen organizations be held accountable now to the words and the actions of their leaders, right? I mean, you see it all across the board. I've seen college football coaches say, oops, I shouldn't have said that. I've seen CFOs at CEOs of, the CrossFit company that said, oops, I'm out of here, right?
Yeah.
So my thing is, I hope people take a pause and understand, like you said, to seek first to understand and then to be understood. And then find your people, find your tactics, develop your business plan 12, 18, 24 months, and execute those strategies irregardless of how business performance is going to be, right? I think that's always the asterisk around these things, right? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Like business is going to, it's like, we're going to hire 20 people next year, right? But then your revenue missed your budget target by 50%. You're like, no, we're only going to be able to do like, 5 people this year, right? My thing is no asterisks around it. Set those plans, set those tactics, set those milestones that you want to hit, irregardless of business performance, right? We're still going to make these commitments and we're going to stand behind these irregardless of how our business performs. That is the right projective to take.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, Chris, one of the questions before we wrap up that I always like to ask every person that comes on to the show, I mean, which, you've already shared so much wisdom and insight, but as you think about, your experience as a finance leader and as an entrepreneur, like, if you were to say, okay, what's out of the whole catalog of advice you have, what's one piece of wisdom that you think business leaders and entrepreneurs should definitely employ and say, hey, this lesson will definitely help you navigate what we're in and what we're facing right now?
I think the number one thing, and I kind of said this earlier, is never be afraid to take risk and always find opportunities to fail, right? When I look back over my entire life, man, and I've had countless of failures, and I will continue to fail and continue to fall up short. But to me, when you look at it from that mindset, to me, there's only two options I have in life overall. This is my entire mindset. Take the credentials, all that out. I look at the lens like this. I'm either gonna win or I'm gonna learn. I only lose if I don't learn. Right. So in anything, I'm either gonna win it or I'm gonna learn from it. Right. So I think that opportunity to boldly walk into taking risk and looking at failure as a major growth opportunity is fundamental. It doesn't matter what role, what organizations, or what your aspirations are going to be. Taking that risk and that opportunity to fail and knowing that you're going to either learn or win from it is monumental, man. And for me, like, that's where I leverage my competency side. And to me, that's just the equation of it, right? I call it to me the greatness equation, right? And to me, that greatness equation is that fundamental flow, right? I'm either going to win or I'm going to learn. And I think also what I'll share to any of those people listening or watching this and to advocate for them is to say, look, man, find your why and your purpose in your life, right? I think some people don't find it till later. Some people find it really early. I still think I'm in a trans phase in doing it. But once you align to your why and your purpose of what you're here, your why is like, my why is I want to be the best CEO, Christopher Eusebio Ortega, I can be personally and professionally. That is why I am here. My purpose is I want to use my skills, passions, and talents to help others realize and achieve greatness. That is my purpose, right? And for me, when I'm boldly and confidently taking on risk with no fear of failure to my why and my purpose, I'm living my best life. And I think people that are able to really take that, right? And that's a journey, right? That again is not, I didn't wake up one day and figure, I know my why and my purpose. Like I didn't figure that out, right? It's been steps, it's been experiences, it's been, difficulties. It's been a whole gamut of things. And I think for me, that's continuing to evolve. So my piece of advice would be just that, man. Take risks, be willing to fail, identify and work towards every day your why and your purpose. And more so than anything, man, sit back and have fun, man. Life is, there's too much stuff going on in the world right now to not sit back, have fun, do the things you love to do, share time with your friends, and enjoy the ride, man.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being on the show, sharing your wisdom, your insight, and definitely, we wish you all the best in your, in your endeavors as you're moving forward as a finance leader, as well as a thought leader, and as well as an entrepreneur. So thank you for being on.
Thanks for having me, Terrell. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, be sure to click the subscribe button and follow us on all social media platforms as the Business Talk Library. building that culture within, let's just say within the tech company, within a high growth tech company, because a lot of people, when they hear about, culture, they talk about, hey, we have, this type of happy hour, we have this type of event. But, what I found is that it's more than just having an occasional event where people get together and have fun. I mean, so what have you seen as far as, how important it is to be intentional about the culture that is in your organization, and kind of what does that mean to you?
Yeah, Terrell, that is a awesome, excellent question. Definitely with a lot of things going on right now. And I think it's three facets that I look at establishing that culture. You're exactly right. You have to have a culture that goes beyond, hey, we provide free drinks in our break room for everybody. Like, that's a good thing to have, but that shouldn't be something you highlight as a culture, right? The first element of it is getting a culture that's about empowerment and not directive driven, right? So what do I mean by that? Working in an international, multinational company, dude, I see that everywhere. I see where some of our operations is very directive driven. And what do I mean by directive driven? It's a person say, hey, go march off of that bridge right now. And they're like, oh, well, he told me to go march off the bridge, so I guess everything's okay. I should just go do that. Versus empowerment to say, you know what? Maybe I should go march off that bridge. Maybe I should go focus on doing this right now and have that experience, right? I think that is so key right now. And a lot of organizations and teams across the board are really being forced to have that less directive empowerment culture because a lot of work is remote now. Like, most of the work is remote. You don't have that person in the office that is sitting there every day directing people to do stuff. You have to empower people. You have to give them trust, and you have to give them the leeway and ability to make mistakes.